All right, coming up, we're going to be talking to Andrew Hoggard. In fact, we'll go and talk to him now because he's waiting for us. The Biosecurity Minister, but also former Federated Farmers Chairman, and obviously a member of the government and a leadership part of the government too. He's not one of those backbenchers rattling around there in the government going, oh God, what do I do? I've been to Bellamy's today already. Oh, I think I'll go to the gym. No, he is one of the DUI ministers and one of the DUIs in the government quarters. Must be much worse though being an opposition backbench MP. Even got less to do, you'd think. And Andrew Hoggard joins us now. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, mate. Listen,
good morning, Michael.
How many hours a week are you doing? You're doing 60, 70, or some days you get a bit of a downtime?
I've got no idea to finish the count. Best I know is getting into Parliament around 7:30, 7 o'clock.
It's too early.
And going back most nights 10 o'clock. So whatever that works out at. And that's on the Monday to Thursday that I'm for the sitting weeks, and then on the Friday I'll go somewhere to a ministerial visit. On Saturday I try and vegetate on the couch, but my wife and daughters have other ideas, and then on Sunday I've got all the reading to do for the coming week.
Where do you actually live? Do you live in the Manawatu?
Yeah, just north of Fielding. Yeah,
do you go and watch any rugby?
I haven't watched rugby since I stopped playing it, to be honest.
Okay.
I occasionally watch it on TV. I don't know. Something flipped to me, and when I stopped playing, I kind of lost interest.
Well, gosh, the rules, it's okay for those of us who are committed to the game. It's not the game that we knew, so it's all right. It's not very entertaining.
For me, I didn't really like how they went with the scrum rules and all the rest of it. And I thought,
it's just madness.
I can't follow the game anymore, and
No. They want to know why people aren't watching and going to the games. Well, just go and look at the spectacle. Having said that, you've got a school very close to you who's done extraordinarily well in rugby, Fielding High School. They got
That's
a team.
where my daughters go. Yep.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Gosh, they're a good little school, aren't they, when it comes to rugby?
Oh, they're an excellent school when it comes to a lot of things. Very good on pushing academic, as well as sporting across a number of codes. So there's a number of champions at that school across numerous codes. Obviously, Sam Whitelock is the most recognised, but and all the other Whitelock brothers. But there's a number of other New Zealand champions that have come from that school, and not just in sporting, but in other areas as well.
Yeah, no, they're doing something right. I should bottle it. Andrew, that's not what we're talking about today, though. We're talking about the latest reports into agriculture. I think now New Zealand's sheep numbers have been reported as being at their lowest level. Oh God, I don't know where you'd have to go back to go get 20 million sheep, but probably in the 1920s, maybe in 100 years.
Yep.
Would that be right? You'd have to go back that far, wouldn't you?
I mean, I know the peak was about 70+ million in 84, but it would have to be well back into the early part of the 20th century when they were last at 20 million.
Yeah, and the worrisome thing about that is not just that stock numbers are dropping, presumably in response to both wool and meat. We've talked about that before, commodity prices, but that so many farms are being converted into carbon forestry enterprises as well, and the effects that that's having upon the rural community. Can I ask you, are there any levers that you can pull to ensure that rural communities retain the health that they've always been, the vitality of them? Or is it just inevitable that this country gets taken over by, ironically, the sort of people that run Winston Pulp and Paper and their carbon conversion farms in this country?
Look, there'll always be change to our communities. I mean, I look around northern Manawatu, and, there's a lot of little halls and little communities that were probably more vibrant going back 30, 40 years. But as our cars can go further and our roads improve, we'll travel more. We don't, go into Fielding rather than the local little corner shop, wherever it was, to get groceries, etc. So there's always going to be that pressure. I guess what I've been concerned about for a long amount of time has been, this is pre-politics, back in Feds, was where we had a kind of whole critical storm perfect storm of whole range of issues coming together that forced a lot of costs up on particularly sheep and beef farmers. The incomes were struggling because of weak markets, and in the last few years it's gotten a bit, it was all right there for a while with lamb meat. That struggled more, and then you've got the alternate land use, which was carbon forestry. Obviously, was a better investment for people. So when people wanted to retire and move off the land, and who was the next person that was going to buy the farm? Well, obviously, the carbon forester was winning the deal then. In terms of what government can do about that, obviously, ETS and forestry, that's outside my remit. Mr. Macleay and Watts are working on stuff there, which is kind of in the coalition agreement. It talks about, and pre-election there's talk around limiting that afforestation. They're doing that work. I can't really talk about that. I have to leave that for them. In terms of the cost side, that's something I can talk about, because there's a number of areas where I'm involved with. If you look at stock exclusion rules that were going to be introduced, that would have forced a huge amount of fencing costs on some really extensive farms. In some cases, it would have been up to, six-figure amounts to fence off creeks where you've got maybe a few sheep and a couple of cattle wandering around. No real, animal or impact on the environment, very minor. And that was going to, just add to that cost, which would have made it even more likely that those people would have gone, well, I can't afford this, so I need to sell up, and who's left to buy? So, we've removed those rules. SNAs were another cost that was going to be imposed. Farm plans, these are stuff that, we're working on that whole cost side of it. And I guess the biggest cost that most farmers face is the interest bill. And so we've got the select committee doing the review on rural banking, led by Mark Cameron, and so they'll be looking into, is everything working properly there, and are farmers getting a fair shake of the stick? Are there some regulatory imposts that have been placed that have driven those margins quite wide from urban lending to rural lending? And certainly I've seen, it used to there would always be a slight little margin for rural lending over and above urban. But then in the last 3 or 4 years, just diverged quite dramatically. And you can probably point to a few bits of regulation that were forced on banks that may have driven that. It may not have driven it, and they just may have used it as an excuse. We'll let the select committee delve into that. But those are the sort of things as a government we can certainly work on. And in terms of improving the income side of it, that's where Minister Macleay comes in with his trade hat. He's away this week, busy working on trying to secure trade opportunities for New Zealand farmers. So the more markets we can open up, the more we can lift the income for the sheep and beef, and that will certainly help